Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening. Thank you for being here. I'm Sherilyn, your moderator, and I see quite a few faces. I know it's so wonderful to see you all back again. We're delighted to have you here. Hey, Susan Thorpe, I think you're kind of new. I don't remember seeing you before. How are you? Thanks for coming tonight. Fantastic. We've got a full evening tonight. Our topic is just conversations, and you'll be hearing more about that and meeting our panelists from the Green Acre Baha'i School in Eliot, Maine, and the Chief of Police of Eliot, Maine, Chief Eliot Moya. I'll be introducing them to you shortly. While you were waiting, I hope you had an opportunity to text and find out the Indigenous territory in which you reside and to enter that in the chat. We do that in recognition and in honor of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, not only for their hereditary work in preserving and saving the land, which, as we all know, has been appropriated, stolen from them, but also because they're considered invisible, the invisible minority. And this is our opportunity to say, we see you and we thank you. So if you haven't had an opportunity to do that, please do so. We are going to have a number of special treats tonight. And so with that, I'd like to start with the gratitudes in recognition of those who have made this evening possible. And of course, that starts with you folks because you're here. So we have someone to share this wonderful presentation with, and we're really glad you could make it tonight. First on my list, as always, is Jillian and Nason Sturdivant. And Jillian and Nason are the tech team of the Racial Healing Racial Justice series. So they make everything work and they make us all look good. And so we always like to give them a shout out and thank them for their work and their service to us. Special guest we have this evening is Laura Ware. She'll be singing a song for us when we go to Calling in the Ancestors. And we also have, she's one of the panelists, but for those of you that have been around a bit, you also know Jessica Gaines, who is a phenomenal singer. And she's going to be contributing to the devotional this evening as well. So that's an extra special treat. We not only get to hear her in person and see her, but she's also going to share that wonderful voice with us. So having said that, let's go to our Calling in the Ancestors slide. Jillian, please. And Laura, I believe you're here. So whenever you're ready. And we invite you to put your ancestors' names in the chat, anyone of blood or spirit that you would like to call to mind.
We are building a new world. We are building a new world. We're building on love, not hate, and this building, children, is here to stay. And we're building, Lord, won't fade away. God came to Moses, as the burning bush, He came to Jesus, as a dove, He came to Muhammad as the angel Gabriel, and the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the most great spirit, the glory of God. If you can perceive it, then believe and take this world of love and make this world of love. God came to Moses, as a burning bush, He came to Jesus, 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 as a dove, as a dove. He came to Muhammad in the angel Gabriel and the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the most great spirit, the glory of God. If you can perceive it, then believe and help build this world of love and help build this world of love.
And Robert is reading for us now.
As the Friends work together to remove the blight of racism from society, challenges will no doubt arise. However, through patience as well as love for one another, it will be possible for them to encourage and support each other to reflect deeply on their own obligation to deal with the issue of racial prejudice. In such a culture, each individual can personally assess in an atmosphere of uncensorious forbearance his or her own condition and the possibilities for improvement. In this way, all can grow together and develop their capacities in an environment characterized by tender affection, reciprocity, and cooperation, in which the Friends do not sit in judgment of their fellow believers, but rather urge each other to contribute their share to the establishment of the world order of Baha'u'llah.
Happy to share this song with you all. And I think one of the themes that you'll be hearing tonight is the oneness of humanity. And I was thinking about what to sing, and normally I don't think about this song in that light, but I've started to. And I hope it comes across. We all come from God, and do we return? We all come from God, and unto Him do we return, like a stream flowing back to the ocean, like a ray of light returning to the sun. We all come from God, and unto Him do we return. We all come from God, and unto Him do we return, like a stream flowing back to the ocean, like a ray of light returning to the sun. We all come from God, and unto Him do we return. We all come from God, and unto Him do we return, like a stream flowing back to the ocean, like a ray of light returning to the sun. We all come from God, and unto him do we return. We all come from God, and unto him do we return. We all come from God, unto him do we return. We all come from God, and unto him do we return, and unto him do we return, and unto him do we return, and unto him do we return.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you, Jessica and Laura. I really, really appreciate the soul you brought. Thank you very much. So grateful to have you both here at the same time. It's wonderful. Okay. Every evening when we're here, I give you an idea of how we're going to approach the presentation. You know, they're all a little different. Today we have a panel, for example, with a video. And of course, always lots of opportunity for discussion, you know, afterwards. We will have the chat off when the presentation starts, so that we're all putting our attention where it needs to be. One thing I'm going to start doing, because you know this series is not just a place to come and spend the evening, although we're delighted you're here. We also want you to be able to engage in more meaningful conversation and to take things away with you. So we came up with some questions. I'm putting them out here now, and I'll bring them back again later after the formal presentation. And so these are some things for you to think about as you're listening this evening. And we would like you to focus on responding to these questions during the Q&A session. Okay, so I'll just kind of read them from the top. And this first one is for right now, actually. What is your intention tonight? Why are you here? You say, well, Cheryl, it's obvious I'm here. You know, this is a great presentation. Well, yeah, that's true. But what do you want out of it? How do you want to advance your understanding from tonight? That's the fundamental question. And of course, this is one you answer for yourself, obviously. It's also really important as we're trying to engage in communities that it's okay to ask questions. You don't know everything. That's why we're here. In fact, that's why we have a manifestation, because we don't know everything, right? There's a lot we have to find out. And so please ask questions of our presenters, clarifications, and so forth. What was new for you tonight? Perhaps you heard something that you never considered before. Or what has changed your outlook based on this evening's presentation? What touched your heart or spoke to you? Share that with us, because that sharing inspires and can touch the heart of others. Don't keep it to yourself. What could you utilize in your community or personal space from what you've heard this evening? And then what would you share with others about tonight? What are your takeaways? And finally, is there anything from this evening that you're grateful for learning or hearing or seeing? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and do our introductions for our presenters. And I'll just recap briefly the presentation focus: just conversations, exploring race and justice with police and prosecutors from Eliot, Maine, an interracial Baha'i team from Green Acre, a Baha'i Center of Learning, and Chief of the Eliot Police Department, Chief Eliot. They will share their experience with ongoing conversations with police and prosecutors around the topics of racial justice. This started a while ago, and so we'll also hear how they have expanded this effort and some ongoing things with that. But first, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the presenters this evening. And that's Najee Brown, Chief Eliot Moya, and we can bring them up on Spotlight, Robert Shapiro, and Jessica Gaines. There's one other who I think you'll see in the video, but he couldn't join us tonight, and that's Frank Robinson Jr. So I'll tell you a little bit about Frank, not as much since he's not here, but I'm sure many of you know him. He's been at Green Acre as the operations manager since 2018. And he's worked in South America, Zimbabwe, Jamaica, Barbados, and Switzerland. And at Green Acre, he's found a synthesis and coherence in bringing his capacities to the center's outreach efforts in media, art, empowerment of children and youth, social action, and exploring the nobility of all humanity. So Frank, we're thinking about you, even though we know you're doing other exciting things tonight and couldn't join us. Jessica Gaines. She's an artist at heart and a nutritionist by training, and she's been offering and coordinating educational programming for adults, youth, and children for the past 20 years, whether as a children's program coordinator at the regional, at Brea College, a regional coordinator for the Appalachian Regional Training Institute, or as owner and coach at Middle Way Health Coaching. Currently, she's serving as program coordinator at Green Acre. There, she's at the intersection of several of her loves: conversations about race in America, the arts, concepts found in the teachings of the Baha'i faith, and working with groups of people who want to contribute to the betterment of humanity. Thank you for coming tonight, Jessica. Najee Brown. Najee Brown is an incredibly successful entrepreneur. After starting his media company, Mindless Thoughts, in 2011, he's helped provide numerous resources to other aspiring artists. In addition to running his own media and arts company, Najee Brown also produced his own music and has danced on every stage from the Apollo to Carnegie Hall. And if that isn't diverse, I don't know what is. That is just an accomplishment in and of itself. Goodness, that's so exciting when I read that. And I love both venues. Most recently, Najee wrote and produced his own play, The Bus Stop, which sold out 6 times in New York City and was recently featured at the Seacoast Rep last summer. I hear that it's going to be showing somewhere in the Midwest, December 8th. Perhaps he'll tell us a little more about that later on. And we'll get you connected with that. He co-wrote and directed the musical Glimmerings of Hope, which the title may sound familiar to some of you from a Ruhi Youth book for junior youth. And that premiered in New York City and toured Michigan in the spring of 2019, all pre-COVID. He also directed and choreographed the award-winning musical Henry Box Brown, A Musical Journey in Edinburgh, Scotland in the summer of 2019. Najee oversees the Soul, that's spelled S-O-L, series at Seacoast Repertory Theater, which will focus on presenting Black, Indigenous, and people of color or BIPOC narratives. Stokely and Martin and Navia's Brother are his newest plays to premiere at Seacoast Repertory Theater. Welcome, Najee. Thank you for coming this evening. Now the administrator at Green Acre, Robert Shapiro. Oh gosh, what a great team he has to work with. He has more than 20 years experience facilitating seminars, meetings, and workshops on community building throughout New England, both as part of the Baha'i community and for white people challenging racism, moving from talk to action. Using the asset mapping process, he kickstarted Eliot Connects, a community-based collaboration initiative, which brings together people and organizations to enrich the well-being and vibrancy of the community. Robert is also an artist by training and calling, having attended the School of Museum of Fine Arts in Tufts University. where he studied painting, poetry, and dabbled in stand-up comedy. So we've got to keep an eye on this one. And then finally, our very special guest, and I have a nickname for him because I had the pleasure of introducing this group at the Race Amity conference earlier this year. And I like to call him Good Chief Moya, but he wants us to call him Eliot, but I gotta say Good Chief Moya. So welcome, Good Chief Moya. Eliot, as he likes to be called, joined the police department in 2007 after completing his service in the United States Air Force Reserve. He advanced through the ranks of patrol, field training officer, investigator, and lieutenant before being sworn in as the town's 6th chief of police in 2016. He sets out to inspire his team to have pride in their work, continuously improve, and treat all with respect and empathy. He's a lifelong learner. He aims to constantly sharpen his skills and leadership and proactively seeks ways to advance policing for the small agency and create future leaders through staff development. Eliot enjoys spending time with his wife and 2 daughters and passionately cheers the New York Mets. So with that, we welcome all of you. Special welcome, Eliot, Chief Eliot Moya. And now I'm going to turn it over to Robert and the presentation will start.
Well, thank you so much, Sherlyn, for creating this wonderful environment for us to jump in and share a little bit of the story, ongoing story that we're part of in a little town in Maine, in Eliot. I just feel very humbled this evening. I mean, I was just thinking about, it was just so powerful to call back to the ancestors and really feel that this evening. And I feel like there's really a strong part of our story that feels to me has so much to do with Louis Gregory, who many of you have heard of and know, who of course spent his final days in Eliot, Maine, and hopefully I can successfully weave in how he's been part of it, but he has felt like he has been accompanying us from the next world in these conversations in ways big and small throughout this process. And when I'm truly reflective and in a good spiritual state, I realize that he has really provided so much of the spiritual fuel that's enabled us to go on this journey. The other part I really want to kind of emphasize in all of this that's really been at the heart of this has been this whole process, which is on one level simple to describe, but I think is a key to transformative conversations, which is forming genuine friendships with folks and then building on those relationships through ongoing, trust doesn't come easily in this world. Trust really doesn't come easily given the racial hierarchy that we live in the United States. And in so many ways, trust and relationships that are built on trustworthy characteristics are hard to come by. But they've been extraordinarily essential to why we've been able to, in whatever small way that we have, move forward these difficult conversations in a way that's been both meaningful and I believe transformative. At least for all of us directly involved, it's been transformative, as you'll hear our stories. So we're gonna, just so you know what we're gonna follow through, I'll share a little bit more of kind of how this came along. I wanna then hand it over to Naji, who will share some of his experience initially. And part of that is also to set up the video that we're gonna be showing, which will show some of the effects of the conversations that we've been having. And then after that, each of the team here will share a little bit of more about their own experience, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So to go back to the, I think, you know, the moment that this really began, it was about 5 years ago, and it didn't seem like this is where we were headed. The Eliot Police Department had kindly helped Green Acre move a trolley stop across across town. A very strange thing to be doing, but this is a trolley stop that had originally been in front of Green Acre back in the early 20s, and probably was one of the first buildings that Abdul Baha saw when he came to Green Acre. Had been located in a different place, and at the same time, Eliot, Chief Moya, had just become the police chief. So I went in my role at Green Acre to thank him and to meet him as somebody in town, and just trying to make the connections of, you know, all the, you know, here we are in a town of 6,000, so it makes sense to connect. On that day, I brought Winton St. Clair, who some of you might know, who was serving as our learning coordinator. It was day 2 or 3, and I'm not sure how thrilled he was that I was saying, hey, let's go meet the chief of police, you know, for a young Black man to then be introduced to the police chief on his second day in a small town in Maine didn't feel natural. So we arrive in Chief Moya's office, and his greeting to us and our whole conversation that unfolded set the tone for what unfolded over the next number of years. He greeted us warmly, as Winton characteristically said. He was so chipper. So there was that initial kind of warm greeting. We dove deep at the very beginning. We started talking about concepts of justice and what we might do to contribute to helping the community together. And over the next couple of years, we tried a lot of things. We probably most notably and successfully had a barbecue. That was probably the thing that's lasted for everybody. But we also had a chance to have we began a kind of a model of having deeper conversations with the local police and the friends who were serving at Green Acre at the time. And we talked about what it is that sort of compels us all to serve community in the ways that we do. It started off, I think that was like, there were 2 questions, and 3 hours later, we all finished up our conversation. So that was, of course, I'm having technical troubles. So that's how we started. And we had this wonderful, interesting conversation. We then had a chance to, you know, do a number of things. We made a bunch of plans that did not work out. I want to emphasize that for anybody who's like, oh, everything worked out great. No, we tried a bunch of stuff and we just couldn't pull it off. So then came, I never know how to describe it. The spring of COVID, but the spring of deeper awareness for many, and just the regular mind and heart numbing awareness of so many others of the murder of Black folks in the depth of racism in this country. But that awareness came perhaps because of everyone being glued to their screens. Certainly in a small town in Maine, it hadn't been the focus. And there was a moment where Najee had just come with us as an artist in residence, and Frank Robinson Jr. was with us as operations manager, and we hadn't yet made connections with Chief Moya. And here were two Black men in Eliot who were, Frank's a runner, Najee was a walker, and we learned about the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, which of course had happened months before, but just came to national consciousness. And so while I had plenty of good reasons to reach out to Chief Moya anyway, I was sort of like, oh, I wanted to just connect in that way. And so made that, and then of course, as the world began to find out about the murder of George Floyd, that's when Chief Moya came to me and said, can we just talk? He'll tell more about that. I was a therapist for a short time during that day, but we we had that talk, and that's what decided, propelled us down this path that we didn't quite know what it was. And Chief Moya wanted a chance for the officers to be able to have a more meaningful kind of conversation about a lot of these questions, not a check the box or cover, make sure you've covered the diversity or the anti-bias training online, but really have something meaningful happen. So we all jumped in, not knowing exactly what that was going to be, sort of armed really only with kind of our principles around the oneness of humanity and the nobility of every human, and the notion of justice as universal participation. And we jumped in and developed we had a series of conversations that became workshops, and you'll see from the video coming up some of the effects that it's had on the participants. But I felt like there was something meaningful there, and it's propelled us on to ongoing conversations in different formats, and some of which you'll hear more about tonight. The last part, just as we're setting this up, that I want to make sure I share is that Najee was on a webinar for a completely unrelated thing, mentioned some of the conversations that we were having, and some prosecutors from the neighboring county got in touch and said, Najee, can you guys do these same workshops? And I remember the day very clearly because it was the day the Breonna Taylor non-verdict came out, the no action came out, and I was despairing a bit. I was like, okay, we've had some conversations. I don't know if anything has happened meaningfully. I don't know where we're going. How are we gonna, this world, where are we? What is happening? And that was the same day that the prosecutors reached out to us and said, can you come talk to us? So again, who knows how much, we've made a little bit of an effect, but I was grateful that we could, with our whole hearts and spirits, try and make our little clump of the earth slightly better when it comes to this stuff. So anyway, as you can tell, I could go on, and I don't want to do any more of that, but I do want to let Najee have a chance to share a little bit about his perspective, and then after that we can look at the video.
Yeah, I won't be before you long because I know everyone wants to get to the video. But I felt like it's important to say that as a Black man in this, I know in a way this can be shaped in a way that looks like everything was fine and glorious, and we went in there just looking to make a difference. But the truth is, I had anxiety up until we had these conversations, and that's just because the life that I grew up in. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York in the 90s. Most of my life was spent in East New York, which was at the time considered one of the worst neighborhoods in America. I could not go home from school without having to fight, and that was my life, So I had to fight to survive at a very, very young age. And when I was born, 3 months before I was born, my father committed a crime. He murdered someone, and he was in prison for most of my life. If you guys seen, or some of you heard of my play, The Bus Stop, that's pretty much what it's really about, just from the perspective of my mother. But going back and forth to prison, of course, I don't have pleasant memories of the COs and how they treated me, my mother, my grandmother. My uncles were also harassed by the police officers on the corner every time we were in and out of Rikers, seeing them for them being locked up. And I've also had 2 incidents where I could have ended up like a George Floyd. And if it wasn't for the people recording when these incidents happen, and my church, and me having my church ID, which my church was a prominent church in the area, and everyone knew my pastor, and they didn't want to deal with that. I don't know where I would be. I'm not gonna lie to you. And I won't probably go into details for the sake of time, but just setting up this conversation, and of course after the video I'll share where I am now. It's just important for you to know that I was not expecting the transformation to happen that happened, not just for the officers, but for myself. I'm gonna hand it back over to you, Robert, and you guys, you can introduce the video. Whoever's introducing the video, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I just really think it's important for you to say that, because this video does show the effects, but it doesn't really share the perspectives of the people like me, Jessica, Robert, and things like that. I'll share with you where I'm at now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Naji. I really appreciate it. And yeah, these were really challenging conversations in so many different ways, and transformative in unexpected ways, but definitely not a easy, happy story. And I think it's really important for us to be clear about that, and not, you know, people get excited when they hear about the stuff we've done, but it has not been easy. And it continues to be a challenge for various reasons. So, but I think we'll go ahead and share this video. I think this is part of a larger video project that's following our conversations. It was an attempt to kind of capture, like Naji said, some of the effects on the folks who participated. But we really wanted to show that, since they can't be here, to give us some sense of, you know, like what those experiences were. But then we'll dive back in afterwards to hear more from us as a team. So on to the video.
Being in the community that we're in and the state that we're in, I didn't see of a problem around here. And obviously there's things that we don't experience or know about. But I guess my first impression was, I don't think there's a race issue around here.
Here we are in Maine, pretty close to 100% white. What do they actually know about race? I live in my circle, so if you don't take an interest in race, you know, you're never gonna talk about it.
It was really the murder of George Floyd, and watching what was going on around the country and the reaction that people were having. And it just felt a lot different than similar situations in the past, and I felt different with it. I think what struck me about the George Floyd murder was sort of the audacity of the officer, the superiority, the entitlement to do what he did in the street with people watching, with other officers watching, without being threatened, without being in a situation where his life was at risk, so calmly. It suggested to me that he felt entitled to do it, that he felt there was going to be no consequences within the system that he works as a police officer, and that if he felt that he worked in that system and the other officers around him allowed that to happen, that to me was urgent, that this system exists and it's around me, and I sort of didn't really give it a lot of credence, didn't really think of it. It just didn't occur to me that way. And it felt like it could happen anywhere.
I didn't think twice. This is the most, you know, culturally diverse place in, I mean, I'll say Eliot, but I think we're probably even expanding in some of the other, you know, some of the other towns here. So I knew, you know, that the people here get it. And I felt that we had a close enough relationship that I can come here and say, help me navigate my feelings right now.
In the midst of all of the news of the country and feeling the fear and hopelessness, we had the opportunity to talk to the local police. So we felt like, oh wow, we can actually have some kind of tangible impact.
a lot of my spiel is this: we're in this together. We're working together. We need to figure out, you know, you can't make all the racist people poof and disappear. How do we work together? How do we find that common ground? How do we bridge the gap? That's my go-to.
So I think that's the biggest thing, is breaking the barriers or breaking the stigmas, the negative stigmas or the stigmas that the media puts in to people's heads.
As lawyers, you know, we're talked at for trainings. You know, people give us presentations where we take in information through lectures. And for me, it's always been more powerful to hear personal stories and the feeling of storytelling or conversations with people. And that's exactly what Najee and Green Acre and Eliot were doing. So we were really excited that they were doing that with police officers and law enforcement, and bringing their own takes on that to their agencies, and wanted to do the same for our agency.
Even though we don't have a very racially diverse community, it was still a subject that we felt like really needed to be talked about, especially because of our position, because we have sort of the ability to decide which charges to bring in against people and to decide what to recommend as sentences. You know, ultimately judges decide what sentences impose, but we have a lot of sort of power in recommending a sentence or agreeing to a sentence. And so it just felt like something that we needed to talk about, given, probably overdue, but given everything that was happening in the world, it was difficult at that point to say, you know, this doesn't affect us.
I think that when we first started, I came in with perhaps an idealistic hope that, you know, after one or two meetings, all the police would deeply understand the intricacies of structural racism. That hasn't happened yet. It will one day. I wasn't expecting the level of camaraderie and friendship that has been developed. Which is funny because, right, like our purpose ultimately is unity. Understanding racism is a part of that process, but ultimately the purpose is unity. And that's actually developing.
Melissa and I were also nervous about using the Baha'i writings and the faith as sort of a touchstone and how people would respond to that. And initially we weren't sure about that ourselves, but sort of, again, as we got to know Robert and the Green Acre team, it's so simple and beautiful, and it's in what it communicates, and it was easy to use those as a touchstone. It couldn't be offensive to suggest that we all believe in the nobility of each human, you know, and the oneness of humanity, that we're all connected. It's a simple idea, and it was helpful to have that as sort of a base point, as a touchstone to go back to. If we can agree on that, you know, how do we arrive there in these other complex issues and problems?
I began to trust basically after our first session, and we all kind of opened up to each other about our different perspectives, about what the other one perceives or experiences. We open up to them, trying to show our side of life. They're showing their side of life. And every single time we've been there, I didn't want to stop.
I think we started talking about race freely and our feelings about race fairly quickly, even in that first session. I think that was largely due to what a great job the Green Acre folks did with that icebreaker. I think, you know, I certainly think that some folks came in really ready to talk about race, and I think it's something that they, you know, wanted to do right off the bat. But I also think that there were some other people that were probably a little bit more hesitant. But I think once we did that, the icebreaker, and people really found that other folks in the office were really willing to put themselves out there, I think it took down a lot of barriers.
I think what was most powerful was realizing that everything comes, all the difficulty around the conversations comes from a fear of being vulnerable with others, with being judged, with saying the wrong thing. And so really creating that safe atmosphere to have those conversations with people that didn't judge, that were so open and willing to be vulnerable with us about their own shortcomings, their own challenges.
When I came into this, my primary motivation was, if there's anything I can do to help my friends of color not get shot by a cop, that's what I want to do. I didn't care about the police, honestly, when I came into this. I'm like, you're white, you're cops, you're men, I don't care about your development. You know, like, you're not my concern. My concern is my friends that you could potentially hurt. But thankfully, in the process, I've learned more about this concept of the oneness of humanity, and realized, oh yeah, I also have to care about them.
One of the things we talked about during the first session came up. I grew up in Northern Virginia, and Remember the Titans was my favorite movie. And I never knew I was growing up in those times until I watched that movie, and it kind of made me go back to, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, things were bad back then. So you'll learn a lot about yourself, and you learn about everybody's experience and where we're at today.
Every time we walked away from a conversation with them, we felt hopeful. We don't often feel that way in our job. There's so much ugliness in what we do. We're sort of with people in the worst parts of their lives all day long. And these conversations were really, even though they were heavy and hard to have, they were filled with so much like light. We walked away feeling happy and joyful after, and hopeful. It's for sure been the first time, the first situation or experience I've had where I've been able to acknowledge that racism is rooted in the system that I work, that it's truly the foundation of it. Starting there puts me in a different mindset when I'm approaching the community and the people that I work with, acknowledging where people start out as in their lives, depending on whether they are the particular group that these systems marginalize, is hugely impactful for how I think about my cases and how I consider just, again, the nobility of every human, or that every person deserves respect regardless of why they're in front of me. This really gives me a different knowledge base to work with, a different understanding, a different lens at which to look at people's individual situations.
I'm not so set in my ways as I was before. I think I try to listen a little bit more. Everybody has their story and where they came from. And a lot of times we're in such a hurry and a rush in the world that we don't take the time to just look around. And so I think I've kind of slowed down and enjoy hearing how people have gotten to where they're at. I got called, there was a suspicious male laying in the sidewalk, and back before we took time that we had our talks, it would be, let's get them moved to the next town, and you know, I'll offer a ride. I'm doing a really good thing, give them a ride downtown, just down the road, and talking to him, he made his way all the way up from the south, and he'd been walking the whole time, and he agreed for a ride. He didn't want to stay where he was at, so I was going to give him a ride to the Cumberland Farm store downtown. And during the ride down there, I got to the store, and we had a chance to talk a little bit, and he was telling me about his past and his family life, and he was trying to escape from that. So when we reached the destination, I was like, all right, well, open the door, time to go. And I kind of just looked in his eyes, and we both looked at each other. I'm like, you know what, we're not going to do this. It's not going to be a quick thing. Let me call some resources. So I got a hold of the homeless shelter in Portsmouth, and they're willing to take them in. And it felt good, and it kind of brought, the reason why I got into law enforcement originally was to help people and serve. And this is a great example of how you just go just a little extra mile.
As we've been shifting and focused more on mental health, policing, I think, I know our arrest numbers are going down. And for me right now, that's a proud thing for me to say.
In terms of my work, I certainly am more cognizant of where people are coming from, what opportunities they've had in life, and where we find them now, and why they might be in a situation where they're committing criminal or engaging criminal conduct, whereas maybe a white person wouldn't be, because they didn't have the opportunities they had that the white person had as a child or even as a young adult. It's been ingrained in us, treat everybody the same. But when we do that, we don't consider someone's background and how they've been treated in the past, either by the system or by other factors in their life. And so that's something I think that has left a mark on me. And when I encounter defendants who might not have had the same life circumstances as somebody else, I do try to take that more into account than I might have previously.
My hope is that we're able to see so many people don't even belong in the criminal justice system, and that we're able to shift those resources to, there's many people that shouldn't be on my desk, and police officers having sort of empathy training and the ability to look at a situation from a different perspective and a lens, maybe sending them off with different resources. And those are, giant big world problems where we have to reallocate resources to different services where people really belong and not in the criminal justice system.
I realize that I have the tendency to be a bit intense. And I want to go in and I want to talk about, talk about the injustice. But through this process, really realizing that to start with spiritual reality, right? That's the foundation. Injustice is not the foundation. Injustice won't last forever, but the oneness of humanity is a principle that underlies everything that we do. So making sure that we're starting at the foundation and working our way up. That's one way that I've started to think about it. Starting with beauty and starting with truth and starting with establishing a unity of understanding about reality. What is real? What is real is we are one people. That's what's real. And building off of that beauty and that truth, it bonds us.
As a child, I wanted to be a superhero. And I think I wanted to be a superhero because I had these grandiose thoughts of changing the world. And so, what does a hero need to change the world? So it's interesting that when we got shut down, that's what we almost did full time, with other institutions, with other people who could truly enact social change. And the big issue of the day was race. It was the cancer that has metastasized to almost every other social issue. So I'm like, okay, I feel like I got that cape on now, because, what happens in every superhero film? You're immediately challenged with the Herculean effort manifests itself. The enemy becomes more prevalent. You're like, oh, I'm looking across from a police officer who's in the media as supposed to be my enemy. So I think I both transformed in what I felt working here. I felt actually that I was doing what Green Acre was meant to do, in some ways. And now it required from me just more of an internal search of how deep am I willing to go to make this a reality. I think I'm living what I had always wanted to be involved in, to see and to be part of something that truly would change society.
Well, I hope that was illuminating. It certainly was for me to see it again. And I think we'll want to, before we jump into questions and things, I think we want to have a chance for the team members that are here and been part of the process to share. I wanted to, I think we'll go in this order, if that's all right. We'll go with Naji, and then Jessica, and then Eliot, and then I might share a few things if it makes sense, or we'll jump into questions. So maybe Naji, if you don't mind jumping in and sharing a little bit more about your experience.
Does everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Naji. And could you give us a little more background, and tell us a little more detail about what you experienced? Is he frozen to anyone else? Okay, Naji's frozen. Let's go to someone else, and hopefully
Sure.
Naji will be free.
Jessica, do you mind jumping in next?
Sure. Just gonna wait. There we go. Okay. Hey, everybody. So, I was thinking about what's the most helpful thing to share. And I think it was really what I learned along the way. And that really, I thought, if I was talking to another person who wanted to do something like this, what would I want them to know if they were like me? And I think the most important thing that I have learned is my attitude going in. I think I went in with this attitude, which I spoke a little bit about it in the video. And I'm so embarrassed now when I watch that video. When I say that, I'm like, I didn't care about the police. I'm like, oh God. I'm like, I hope they don't watch this, because now I care about them and they're my friends, So that's quite a bit of a change, because I went in a little bit of background. Like, I grew up in a predominantly African-American neighborhood. I've lived on Standing Rock. I've lived on other reservations. And, I definitely, of course, haven't had the experiences that Naji has had, but in my own way have had really negative experiences with police, and kind of this mentality that we have a real problem with the police system. And I still think that, of course, that there is a real problem there. But I was making the individuals the problem. I was thinking they're the problem. We're going to go in and we're going to fix them, and that is not helpful. That does not contribute to bonds. And working with the Green Acre team here, I'm so glad that we had each other, because in consulting about the creating the curriculum, creating with in these discourse spaces, everybody kept really pushing for, we need to establish this foundation of friendship first. And my concern was, okay, but let's not capitulate to white fragility. Like, I was really genuinely concerned about that. And I still think that it's a line that we have to walk. We need this friendship. We need to trust each other. We need to know, everybody in the room needs to know that we're on the same team, and there's only one team, and it's everybody. And that we can't be breaking up in teams here. Everybody needs to know in the room that everybody else has everyone's best interest at heart. I came in, I don't care about the police, that's not why I'm here. I'm not here for them. But that doesn't lead to unity. there might be a bit of truth in there, but taking part of this process, I realized that, oh yeah, they're part of the human family too. And I have to also care about them. And they are also noble beings. And they are in this, they are the solution. They are the solution. And we are the solution, and our working together is the solution. So I think because I was so blessed to be a part of this team, that in our consultations and in our unity, what came from that for my own personal learning in doing this work is that I can't let my desire to fight injustice get in the way of establishing bonds with people. And that is a fine line. And we're still walking that line. And we're still trying to figure out what's just, what's right, how to not. Because we're not here to call people out, but we still need to, of course, address things that are problematic. Absolutely. And we're here to learn. But I can't demand that another person on this path be where I want them to be right now. You can't go from 1 to 9 in a second. And if my job is to accompany you, then I need to take your hand and meet you where you're at. And we walk together, whatever that looks like. Because that ultimately, that's not satisfying to the part of myself that's like, I'm a justice warrior. That's not satisfying. But that's my ego. And I had to recognize that. We need to be asking ourselves what works. What works. But at the same time, like, I was often aware of Najee and Frank. And I was like, is this fair for them to be in this conversation? Is it fair for them to be hearing? Are they getting re-triggered? Are they getting triggered? So, and that, I'm sure that can happen, of course, in an environment like this, and knowing what's right for what person, what group of people, the configurations that are there. There may be spaces, there may be spaces where it makes sense for only white folks to be there, so they can ask their questions without hurting somebody. So they can look ignorant and be ignorant, but be accompanied in moving forward, if that makes sense. And we didn't do that, by the way. That we decided that didn't need to be done, but we talked about it. We talked about it because that's real. So I think for the sake of time, that's all I will share for right now.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing that. And maybe Eliot, you could go next. Is Najee back with us? I can't quite tell from my.
Yeah, Najee's back now, but let's go ahead and hear from Eliot, good Chief Eliot Moya.
Can everybody hear me okay?
You could talk a little louder and get a little closer.
Sure.
Please.
I'm starting to like the good Chief Eliot. It actually has a nice ring to it.
It does.
And just a moment of honesty, and I want to thank you, Jessica, because we kind of felt, how you were feeling. It was obvious to us, and had you not, taken that internal look, it could have, derailed the entire, conversations that we were having. So thank you, thank you for saying it, recognizing it, and you having the power and recognizing that needed to be done really got us here, so I do appreciate that. Getting back to Robert said it amazingly, pretty much describing how this whole thing happened. But what really kind of what spoke to me was that he was a therapist for a few moments there after after George Floyd was killed, because I was struggling on how I felt, with my emotions personally, as a police chief professionally. I was like, how am I going to lead through this? It was like a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions going on And having had the relationship and, and the trust from our growing friendship with Robert, there was no question. I knew where to go to just say, let's talk about this, and I'm glad I did, because, we have made some amazing friendships. We've really just kind of, come an amazing, it's been an amazing journey and came quite the distance. And I think one of the really important things that I realized was, police it's an interesting culture, and you don't realize that it's a very difficult culture. And we need to have, we need to watch for those people that become police officers that are honest, pure, best intentions, are strong enough to, to kind of overpower that culture that sometimes can be negative, that we've seen in the past, traditionally, where there's silence, or, we have to be macho and have this big ego, and we're, have to put up this wall. And so as I kind of talked to Robert, they amazingly created this, this forum for us to have these conversations. The officers, was I worried a little bit of how this would all be, taken by the officers? A little bit, but I think it didn't take 10 minutes. And really everybody kind of at least started to laugh together. And it was at that point I was like, this is going to work. What does that mean? This is going to work, right? I guess for me, it was just the fact that we were able to have conversations about race, social justice, where policing is. I think the guys, Jessica said it best, we created this environment where we could all ask these questions and get straight answers, and back and forth. I think it was really just a fantastic way to open up and start this relationship. And I'm proud of it. I know, there's still a lot of work to be done, but, we're looking at a lot of good police reform that's happening. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but there's a lot of it that I do. We've looked at some policy changes, and it's just been a really fantastic journey for us. And yeah, I mean, really, that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to, once we get to the question and answer portion, to kind of dig a little deeper.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll call you Eliot. Yeah, so Naji, do you want to?
Yeah, I apologize for that. My computer just went. I don't know what happened. It has never happened before, but everything happens for a reason, and I strongly believe that. You guys heard my story, so I'm not going to get back into that, but I think from the start of our first conversation, I mean, everything that we did in terms of preparing for the workshop, how Robert mentioned that we called on Louis Gregory, and the synergy was just there. We almost basically agreed on mostly everything in our consultations about preparing for this. And there was a magic in that too. We spent more time preparing than, the actual conversation, which was the first one was 2 hours. We probably spent about 10 hours preparing for that. And that was so essential to everything. But from the first conversation, I saw immediately what change could happen by simply literally having a conversation with these guys. I have to say this, and I am biased. I don't even live in Eliot anymore, but this is probably the best police department in the country. Their attitudes and their attention to detail, and there's so many reasons why I'm gonna say this, and I'll go into it. From then to now, these guys, and not just Eliot, who's hands down the most genuine, heartfelt, soulful person I've ever met in the entire universe. He is. And I'm not saying that because he's the police chief. I'm saying that because this is my brother. Outside of his job, outside of his occupation, this is my brother. I would fight for him if I had to. And I mean, I don't know if Baha'is believe in violence, but I would, because this guy, he's true to who he is. And I know there were times where he probably felt like, is he doing the right thing? But I think God has a purpose and a plan for everything. And who knew that a man like him would be needed to lead his team through a time like this. He's a Puerto Rican police chief who has an entire white police force, and he's doing the best that he can. And there's so many things that has happened afterwards that has even like grown our relationship even more. For instance, and I'm just gonna be quick. My little brother, I brought him from New York City. He is 9 years old. He's a Black young man. I had a meeting with the chief in his office, and one of the officers, Ron, took my brother all the neighborhood, showed him how the lights work, took him to the fire truck. I got the pictures to prove it. And I'm always concerned about my brother. He is my heart and soul. A lot of the speeches that I made during the rallies that were coming up, he was the main topic because he had a lot of questions about what was going on in the world. That's gonna last him for the rest of his life. I had to mail him his police badge stickers because he forgot them at my house. Like, that was so important to him. And they took the time to do that. And I don't know if I ever shared how important that was, not just for him, but for me, it was really everything. Since then, we did this thing called Project Empathy, where we took 8 people, I don't know if some of you were there, from Seacoast area, and we paired them together with different people. Robert had the idea of pairing Eliot with Tanisha Johnson, who I had a relationship with. She's the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Seacoast. These guys are now like best friends. Like, I gotta go through Tanisha to get to Eliot. But that shows how much this man was willing to make a difference by taking a chance to pair up with someone who obviously thought completely different from him, and using this oneness that's been, the foundation of what we believe, and finding the commonality between these two. Like, I don't think we shared the stories from Project Empathy. We don't have time for that, but that
Yes, you do.
alone was life changing. No, I mean, we can't show y'all. I don't even have it queued up anyway. But and another thing that really changed my life, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this, was that he invited me to the hiring of a new police officer. I'm here, like, and that was probably one of the most educational experiences of my life. Just having the opportunity to just sit with these guys that I've been doing these workshops with, and feeling like they are my brothers. I mean, we were joking together, drinking coffee, and really getting into intense conversations about these guys who were being interviewed. And there were certain people that I was just like, I hope that they don't like this guy. And they didn't like the guy. And I was like, wow, this is really making a difference. I have to share the good stuff because I know I came in very hard with the negative stuff. And I know a lot of people are going to share about the details of what happened in the sessions, and you guys can ask questions about that. But honestly, that's where I am now. And I don't know if my relationship will be like this with other police officers across the world. I do walk with a level of confidence when speaking to a police officer, even when I'm back home in New York City. I'm no longer like, not that I was ever afraid, but who wants to talk to a police officer? I now look and try to find the humanity in that person. Like, if I can look at a police chief and now see him as one of the closest people I have in this town, and I don't have that many close people in the Seacoast, but he is definitely one of the people that I am closest to. If I had a problem, I would give him a call in a heartbeat. And if I can do that with him, then I can search for the humanity of other officers. And hopefully they will search and look for mine. That's all I can ask for as a Black man in this country, is that when they see me, that they can look for mine. And they did. This police department did. Will others? I don't know. But I know for at least at this moment and this time, and when I am in Eliot, Maine, I feel safe. And that's all you can really ask for as a Black person. There are not many places where you can go on this earth and feel safe. You can roam free. You can breathe without a white glance or negativity or people who don't like the way you dress or the way you speak and, you know, judging you every moment of your life. But I don't feel that around these guys. I don't. And that's honest. Thank you.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much,
you so
Naji.
much. Very powerful. Well, I guess we'll open it up for questions now. And I thank you all for sharing portions of what you've experienced. I'm sure you're going to be processing it continually. Let me ask one question real quickly. And folks, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, or you'd like to share something that touched your heart or that you saw differently, you know, please raise your hand in the little reaction thing and I'll call on you there. I got you, Julia. And we'll go from there. One quick question, if you could just tell us what's transpired since. I understand you're doing some other things in the community that have come about. So if you could, maybe one of you could just tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll go into the questions. I think folks would like to hear about that too, what's happened since and what new things you're doing.
Well, I can briefly share, and then maybe we can fill in. So we've had a couple more sessions with the Eliot Police, and we're continue. That's sort of ongoing. And we've set up a time to have like a regular kind of lunchtime chance for people to talk with the prosecutors. With the prosecutors, we also got together and we actually watched the bus stop. They all watched the bus stop and we had discussions around that. And Naji mentioned a little bit about Project Empathy, which was really a key extension of the conversation. And we're also in process of with Eliot and with Tanisha of doing a podcast. So that is going to be coming your way in the nearest future. I don't know exactly when, but near. Recording has begun. So we're really excited to see how this friendship that developed is now, and it's turned into some really great conversations about all kinds of things. Is now going to be a chance to actually get that out and have others listen in on these amazing conversations. So I don't know if I missed anything. I think there's, I guess just what the tapestry project, which has been really helpful, which you saw a bit of earlier, is another ongoing thing. And I think I guess the other pieces that I should mention that are future oriented is we're in the process now of looking at and reaching out to other police departments in the area. And potentially other groups as well. We took the prosecutors through a training so they can actually come help co-facilitate with us as we did, and we brought the Eliot Police to them. So that is another thing that happened this summer and will be ongoing. So we're trying to figure out how to make this spread and trying to keep the principles at the heart of it. So
yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm sure all of us want to know about that training that you did with the prosecutors and how we can access it and, replicate that in areas that they feel they're ready for that. Okay, we've got a lot of hands up, so I'm going to ask people to be kind of, to the point. Okay, so Julia, you're up first, and then it's Winnie. Go ahead, Julia.
I had a question for Chief Eliot Moya. I was wondering how is it that you thought to contact the Green Acre organization? How did you think of that? Like, I'm interested in, I guess, how did you have that impression that that was a place that you should go for advice?
Great question, and the simple answer is friendship, because we knew each other from before. So it wasn't like I was going there blind and just saying, well, I heard you guys do this. We've had similar conversations, and we really just created that relationship and friendship earlier on. And interesting, when you fast forward, clearly I'm glad we did. And maybe it was for a reason. When Robert and Winton walked in my office, it felt like we were fast friends. And I felt like we always kind of checked in on each other also, and it just made it easy. I mean, it felt like my police car went to autopilot to the Green Acre campus there to talk to him. So I hope that answered.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Winnie?
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to comment. Can we clone Eliot to be in charge of a number of other police stations around the country?
We can try.
But my question is this. It's difficult. Are you hearing me?
We lost you for a second.
We so often run into people. I'm sorry, what? Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
I'm unmuted.
Go ahead,
okay.
Winnie.
So often in trying to have conversations, unfortunately, we often run into the attitude the police can never be wrong. Anything a policeman does is always correct, is always appropriate. And how do we even open conversations in dealing with this attitude?
So are you saying that the police feel like they're never wrong?
I'm saying individuals that I have run across. Sometimes they're police, sometimes they're, general public. But in trying to open up a conversation, it's like a brick wall of people that have that attitude, that the police are always right. They never can do anything wrong. They never should be second guessed or anything like that. How do we open conversations when we're dealing with that kind of a brick wall?
That's a great question, and a really even better description, because it is a brick wall sometimes. I'm seeing a positive turn, if that makes any sense. I mean, even for us, I think we're modeling that. As I mentioned before, police culture can be a very difficult one. Sometimes police officers they always say, right, they'll stick to their own. Right, they'll just all blue through and through, and they won't hang out with other people. And I don't know that that's 100% true, but one of the things that's happening now, and again, I'm just speaking for as a police officer, is really looking at officer wellness, right? And so part of what, at least at our department, is as a leader, I have to model and say, hey, are you okay? I have to ask these questions to just check in on everybody, which is something that I don't think we do enough in police work. And that's where I think, like Jessica mentioned, that's where the ego comes in, and that's where that brick wall starts to be built. But if we can just, kind of check in on each other, have honest conversations, respectfully call one another out, if something was off a little bit, then we start to get there. I've really we're trying to model that now in our police department, and I find that the conversations within our walls are a lot more, they're deeper, they're more truthful, and they're sometimes difficult conversations, but we come out at the other side much better. If I see somebody with even you can tell somebody's kind of attitude or demeanor, right, if they're not having a good day, then it's important to me to say, hey, what's going on? There would be a time when we'd say, whatever, get in the car and go do your shift. But if there's something going on and I don't call it out, then he may, or that police officer may take that out on, somebody that they pull over. that's just human, forget the whole, with police comes the power, right? But we're allowed to have a bad day, just like anybody is. So it's kind of just, trying to call that out, check in on one another, which I think is important to do.
Thank you, Chief. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I had one other quick thought, which was, we had one of the officers who describes himself as he doesn't change his opinion because he's always right. And, that was really his approach. And I think in particular, Najee and Frank, being in a number of conversations with him, but others of us as well, I guess, to a smaller degree, hearing him out and hearing what was going on for him, and then building up that trust allowed for him to hear new information. And I think there was a critical moment around the Black National Anthem. He came in our second or third session saying, why did they make up the Black National Anthem? And as you can probably tell it better than I did what you actually said, but basically you're like, no, it's not new. And I grew up singing this every day. And because they had developed a rapport, that officer could actually change his mind. And that was a small thing, but it was a big thing. And I feel like that's I don't know exactly all the ingredients that went into making that possible, but I felt like that shifted some of that with that particular person, that kind of,
Can I say something real quick to that, Cheryl?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Winnie, I think that often I want to go in and I want to address things directly. And that is not the approach that we took. We took the approach of laying this foundation of friendship and camaraderie first. And really everything that we did, we started realizing it needs to bring walls down. And I think that's what you're talking about. How do we bring those walls down? I don't think you can have a conversation. I don't think you can have that conversation until you've already established that trust and the walls have come down. And then you can have that conversation. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Najee, you want to speak on that too?
I talked enough, but yeah, I'm good. I think everything that needed to be said was said. Yeah, I totally agree with Jessica on that.
Okay, and we have plenty of time, folks, so don't feel constrained like, okay, you have to limit yourself, unless you don't have a lot of time. Okay, Deb, hi Deb.
Had to find my unmute. Thank you. My name is Deborah Todd and I live in Seattle, so I'm on the other side of the country from you guys. Just a little bit of background information. About 25, 30 years ago, I lived in Seattle's Chinatown, and I was one of the few white faces down there. But the police officers on the beat and in our neighborhood really wanted to bridge the gap between them and the community. And they made the effort to initiate community safety committee and met regularly and networked with the citizens who lived in Chinatown. And so my experience, very firsthand experience with the police force was very positive. I saw really noble people caring about the community and going that extra mile to connect with the community. Occasionally we saw the bad apples. They are so few and far between. But my question is for good Chief Eliot and for the other members of the team. Have you taken this on the road yet? Because there are so many communities who need to hear this message and who need to see your example. This is such a great example of community and police networking.
Thank you, Deb.
We haven't. I feel like Robert has big, grandiose plans, though. Some of the projects that we've done that have been like on the periphery, again, talking about Project Empathy and this podcast, the way the world works now, and there's so many outlets that we can start. So the podcast, I think, is a great way to do that. I'm happy to. I don't know where to begin. I don't know if everybody would be open to it, but I'm really proud to have this partnership with the Green Acre and that we're modeling it. So I love to see, this little piece of the documentary. I absolutely love it. It is truly, it makes me feel incredibly proud. So not yet, but maybe soon. Maybe Robert can speak to that a little bit, Jessica.
Yeah.
Certainly grandiose plans for sure, but no, I think that one of the things. So we're partly we're thinking about how do we train, sort of go through a process with others where they can also then participate so that we can start spreading this out. But I think one of the current factors that seem so important, and the reason why we're taking it slower than we might, is because realizing the importance of relationships. We could say, hey, do go, follow these steps, but it wouldn't have the same effect, right? Because the reason why we're able to pull this off is because we have this real relationship, with technical troubles, 2021 problems. So we have this real relationship. That's why we're able to do that. We quickly were able to develop that with the prosecutors, which is interesting. So there are ways to accelerate that, but you still have to create the environment. You still have to create the genuine friendship. Those things still really need to be there for this model to work.
Let me ask you a question here and just dip in just for a moment. How long would you say it took before, for example, with you and good Chief Moya, to get to that point where you both felt, or at least one of you felt, okay, this is a pretty good friendship here? About how long did that take? And of course it varies with circumstance and people and so on, but for your experience, about how long was that?
I would say, so it was a number of years of trying to do stuff together. So,
Okay.
and I think that's where our friendship developed. We, from the very beginning, we started talking about what could we do for the community as well as our friendship, right? So it was all simultaneous. But thinking about some of the other relationships that have developed, it's the depth of the conversation that I feel like accelerates the friendship and the trust. But I'd love to hear from other folks too.
Yeah, I think it's important I know a lot of people, especially when we have these conversations, people want to know the recipe, right? Like, how do you do this? I want to do this back in my hometown. I want to do this where I'm from. And I'm always very cautious of that because first, you do have to recognize that there are a lot of people in this country, just because you may have these, great positive interactions with law enforcement. It's not like that everywhere else. Growing up in Brooklyn, I can tell you that the police department is very different from the police department in Eliot, Maine. And that's not just from you. That's not just from my experiences, but from the experiences of my friends. Like I've seen and witnessed a lot. So we have to acknowledge that there, and we also have to acknowledge that the relationship between Blacks and police officers has been messed up because first police officers were slave catchers. Like that's the foundation of the relationship. There are certain things that we have to acknowledge before like kind of moving into this work. It's also just I think one of the most profound things that was said in the relationship and during the conversations was that we have to understand that we've all kind of been lied to in terms of history. There was a lot of things historically that these officers just did not know. And I'm from New York. I grew up in a very Black church who very Black successful people. Denzel Washington was a regular member. Like that was my life. I was around a lot of Black excellence where things were shared with me that wasn't common to the average Black person. However, coming up to Maine or even New Hampshire, Portsmouth, none of this stuff is common knowledge. So a lot of things that I say, even the most simple things, it's like, whoa, what was that? I never heard that before. There needs to be some kind of re-education that happens too, along with the relationship. And I'm not saying like shove slavery down people's throats, But just those little things, like, yes, like Robert said, the Black National Anthem, and that does have to happen with the foundation of friendship. But those little things like made all the difference. I remember one conversation, a gentleman said, the only time I saw this country totally united, and I'm sorry if I'm all over the place, but he said one time, the only time I saw this country totally united was after 9/11. And I simply said, was it united for the Arab Americans that were being abused at that time? You know, and like he was just, oh, I guess not. Little things like that. We live in this town where we are. It's a really strong bubble where they don't think racism exists. It's the weirdest things. But living here, my wife, she's Filipino, I'm Black, probably the only Black Asian couple in the whole area. The amount of racist things that are said to us on a regular basis at every day, she's just like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you? And I'm glad I have her, because she constantly checks in on me, because she sees it happens. I'm at the point where I cannot enter an Uber or a car or a cab, because I don't drive, I'm from New York, without being on the phone with her for however long it is, because things are said to me every single day. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm sorry, I don't know where I'm going with this. Please forgive me. But I do say that we just have to acknowledge that there's a lot that needs to be done. And yes, these conversations are great and wonderful, but if you are thinking about doing this in your hometown, you really have to acknowledge those things too, and acknowledge the people who feel the hurt, you know. And I think because we came into this situation with people who are ready and willing and wanting it, it made all of the difference. Because Eliot was there, it made all of the difference. Proposing this to a guy who doesn't want this and thinks that his police department is just fine may not be the answer. No, like, I'm just being very honest with you. But you know, Eliot is the leader of he's the leader of the pack. I love this guy. He's that type of person. And he saw that his department needed it. And he saw that his department could possibly end up in a situation where they had to make a better decision. And he understood that. But there are many people who don't think that way. So like, let's not, I think we can take this and be an example, but I'm very wary of people like, yeah, look, send me them documents and let me go to NYPD with them. Yeah, good luck.
Right. Thank you so much, Najee. I mean, that is so rich and informative what you shared. I'm gonna put it in a bullet. Know your reality, understand where you live. And you do that by interacting within your own community, whatever that may be, and let that be your guide. But we still would like those materials, okay? Things can always be adjusted and modified for local use. Okay, let's see, Dawn, are you there, Dawn?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry I can't be on the video. I think Najee just answered my first question was, how do you conceive of this happening in a larger metropolitan area? And I think you just answered that about reading your reality and understanding where people are. So there's more work that needs to be done that won't be replicated in the same way maybe that happened in this situation. So my second question was, so curious what the icebreaker was that was referred to in the video, and what opened that conversation, because I feel like those beginning moments where people are just sitting across from each other, there's tension. So how did that shift? Because it sounded like something shifted there.
Yeah, I'm dying to know about that icebreaker. Thank you for asking that, Dawn. Okay, who's going to tell us about the icebreaker?
Najee was our icebreaker guy. It
was simple icebreakers. Favorite ice cream. We did. Literally favorite ice cream. What's your favorite song? What book are you reading right now? Little things like that. I mean, you gotta understand, even especially when we got to the prosecutors, these guys were finding out things about themselves that they never knew. So every time someone would open up their mouth, they would go, "Oh, really? I didn't know your favorite ice cream was pistachio. Mine too." And little things like that just immediately sets the tone for just some kind of like oneness and laughter and jokes and people just naturally making fun of each other. It was that was. I mean, we had some other questions that we asked that you would probably be considered icebreakers, but those were like the fun ones that we really used, and they set the tone for the session.
Thank you.
Totally unexpectedly important. Because it set this lightness and this joy and this laughter, and now we're chums, you know. We're talking about ice cream and movies and books, and I'm sitting going, really, this is what we're doing? And it worked, you know. I'm like, this is shallow, and it was great, you know, because everything else was so heavy. Not super heavy, but like it was intense, you know. We needed that lightness and that camaraderie.
And in fact, we actually had the icebreaker later in the sessions, like in terms of like the layout and the rundown, and we actually brought it to the very beginning so that we can not open up with us talking, but so we can hear from them earlier. So it went from like the third or fourth thing that we did to immediately, like as soon as we walked in, hey, yeah, the first thing.
Yeah.
And I think creating that environment was so important, in the laughter and the camaraderie, like we said, and you know, keeping it light to start off. But then we also, the other part, which was that Najee alluded to a little bit, was we asked additional questions, which were a little bit more than icebreakers. And they were, the first one was, you know, what inspired you to serve the community, or who inspired you? And those were really profound answers, you know, from everyone. And that built a different level. And then it was, you know, what's your vision of the future? You know, and then what's your mission in all this? So we talked about things, and I think one of the things in retrospect that felt like it was important is we were saying, not only do we believe everyone is noble, but tell us about your nobility. I mean, we didn't ask that literally, but that's essentially what we were asking, is like, what are your aspirations? What's calling you to this particular service? And so I think then we laughed, we got deep, and then we could start talking about some of this stuff.
And with the prosecutors, it actually got really deep. Some shared some abuse stories that was never shared before. Some talked about like some parental abuse. Like it really got deep. Those simple questions of why you serve the community, and none of these guys knew any of this about each other. It's just so it got, with the prosecutors, it got really deep when we asked that question. And creating an environment like that immediately, I mean, who shares that kind of stuff in front of a group of people that they work with and they got to see every day? But it was very essential for us to create an environment where everyone felt warm, safe, welcome, and wanted, no matter what your views were, right? And I think a lot of things that I have to say this, there was even a time I struggled really badly with one particular guy. He was a prosecutor on first day. Jessica was there. It was not a good day. And I felt after my exchange, because he kind of knocked me off my game like immediately. And we had a little bit of a back and forth about race. I went home. I went to bed at like maybe like 7:30 at night and didn't wake up to the next morning. That's how sick to my stomach I felt about the exchange. And it was no cursing or throwing things or anything like that, but it just wasn't, it didn't feel good. And I think someone said in the group, you have to see if you know, the oneness of mankind is what we're doing. Doesn't mean we're not going to be, you know, that doesn't mean we're going to get challenged with that, right? And we have to believe in that oneness to the point where you have to go, this person is capable of change too. And I mean, he became my target, right? Like, I'm going to just show him as much care and love as possible, and not in this happy way, but just let him know I'm going to tell him the truth. I'm going to share my feelings, but I'm going to make sure that the simple of me just not judging him probably changed his life. I mean, other people and his whole colleagues were ready to see him go. So I didn't even, and that's another story for another day. But just me like having to really believe that this guy can change his viewpoints was hard, and I didn't like it, but I can't go in confessing something that I truly don't believe. And if the oneness of mankind is my foundation, then I have to believe that he can be a part of that new world too. So that was tough, and that was my stance. And but I would have much rather argued with him for like just being very honest with you, for a few days.
Did he change? What happened?
I mean, I don't know.
Or did you see anything after left?
I saw him processing things. I saw him. I mean, in a session with someone else, he ended up being a lot better. And we actually had to figure out, like, okay, maybe it's not best for me and Jessica to be in a session with white men. You know, me being a black male and, her being a black woman. I'm sorry, Jessica, is it okay for me to share this? And we really had to think about this and strategize in a way where I had to understand maybe he wasn't ready to hear it from me. This guy is older than I am. He was in the 60s. He had like 4 careers already, so there's that power structure, and being told something by, I was always told, First Timothy, like, never let anyone judge you over your age, but be the example. But that doesn't mean people are going to see that with me, and me being the youngest person, and it was very, I don't know if he changed, but I know that the seed was planted, and that's not my goal. My goal is not to change people. My goal is to plant a seed to hopefully something that someone else says maybe 20 years from now will finally bring him back to the conversation that he had with me. My goal is not to go in and change. My goal is to just plant a seed. And if I think that way, then I will always feel like I did an okay job. I just need to plant a seed. I need to just show them and tell them about an experience that they never heard before in person. So,
and I think one thing that you did do, Naji, through your approach and the work that you went through and the challenge that you went through, and us consulting as a team as well in terms of how we approached it, is we affected all the members, other prosecutors, and they actually, the ones who came to do training with us actually cited that as, wow, you guys really mean it. Like, because they were ready to jump on the same, and understandably, he was saying some offensive things that were, were problematic, as we would say these days, right? I mean, it wasn't, and but the approach that we came back to him with was like, oh, you guys are serious about this oneness of humanity, and they were like, they were struggling with the same questions and didn't know how to answer them. So I think that was the example that we did, and that was the change that we did in a string.
It was a great opportunity actually to model not othering another person, because that was the reaction that they had to other him, and we were able to model that, and I think that spoke so loudly.
Thank you guys for saying that, because I forgot that happened too. I forgot that yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. This is a phenomenal conversation. There's just so much learning packed into this. It really, really is. And we are really, really blessed to be with you tonight, to hear from you tonight. Truly, truly are. It's there's just so much learning in here, and I that's all I can say. There's just so much learning. When I'm really excited about something, I repeat it over and over. There's so much learning in here. I can't find any other words for it. My gosh, you all ain't going home tonight, okay? I'm not letting you out of here We're going to try and keep you as long as we can. This is just wonderful. Oh, you just don't know how much insight and guidance you're giving us. There's so much affirmations and wow, I didn't look at it that way, and just, oh, just awesome. Okay, let me stop gooing and get back to our participants here. I want to, Manosher is a wonderful friend and he's up next, but I'm going to ask him if he would mind if one of the ladies went before him. Would you mind, Manosher?
Not at all. Ladies first.
Thank you so much. Miss Carlotta.
Thank you, Ms. Sherlin, and good evening. Peace be with you all. I just want to second your excellence about this. I want to second Robert Shapiro's point about the necessity of friendship building. And I really want to second Najee's point about opening up to processes that are going to take some time, and how courageous that is and how challenging that is in this forum. But I have my question. I'm going to put my question out first, and then I want to say something about it briefly. My question is, I'm assuming, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you don't assume things, that the foundation of this whole workshop was based on Baha'i principles, and I know the One Humanity was put forth as being very impactful by that one one attorney, and oops, my light went out. Yeah.
We'll wait
my
for you.
Attorney, yeah, I think I'm here. Where am I? Wherever you see me. I don't see me. But that one attorney, pointed out the impact of the One Humanity on her. And many folks were saying how they were just starting to listen to people and see people as people. So I guess my question was, based on more than the Baha'i principles, did you get into some other foundational focuses? And one that's always important to me is the scientific one that came out in 2003, and that would be the Human Genome Project science outcome. And I wonder if you got into anything like that. Do you hear me?
Well, yes, thank you.
I'm sorry, because I don't see me.
So the answer is yes and no. So we have in a lot of our side conversations, and we have in a lot of the other things that have happened since then. In terms of the workshops that we did, we didn't build those things in, and we consulted about it a lot. I'm hearing echo on myself, so it's confusing. But so we consult. Those were big questions for us, and we didn't quite know how to answer it. I think where I'm at with this, and this doesn't represent the whole team on this necessarily, is that these foundational exercises around these principles are what allowed us to then begin to explore other things. So we're thinking about how do we now incorporate those things. How to bring in, examine some of the other ways that systemic racism affects all of us and all the different pieces to it. And, and things like the Genome Project, like you're saying, like proving that, well, actually, race is a social construct because it's not a biological reality. These kinds of questions are ones that we are eager to explore, and we have the trust, I think, now to be able to kind of, jump into these things in a way that we didn't previously.
So it sounds like, Baha'i principles are carrying the basics. But I just want to add that in my community, what the principle that we raised our children in was community policing occurred. And that's where the police in Lansing, Michigan would have a neighborhood and would get to know the neighbors and get to know the children and do projects with them. And then some policy changed and it was moved away. So that's a real tangible relationship building experience that could have made a difference here. And could make a difference in every town, where it occurs with the police and the community.
Right.
Yeah, because relationship building is huge. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carlotta. Okay, Manosher, thank you for waiting.
My pleasure, and it is also my pleasure to see familiar faces from Green Acre. I'm happy to be in this fireside forum to really experience it. As Charlene, you said it, I'm also very grateful for what these friends have done and are doing. You know, a question that I have, a couple of questions that I have. One is, what is the size of the police force in Eliot, Maine? Because here I am in, let's say, Manucher Mohajeri in the city of Charlottesville, where the police force is much bigger than what the Baha'i community, for instance, or those who would like to do similar projects can do together with the police force. Perhaps the size of the two teams in here, one of Green Acre, the other one of the police force in Eliot, Maine, was one of those very important elements in the success of this project, knowing your reality, as it was mentioned. So that's one thing. The other thing is, the question that I have is, how is the general population, residents of Eliot, Maine, reacting to this? Do they participate in what is going on and in learning and the experience that the other organizations in Eliot are experiencing? And finally, perhaps this is something that should be done starting with smaller towns and moving to bigger places, because there you can develop those friendships and relationships much easier in a way than you could do it in larger cities. Anyhow, these are some of the thoughts or questions that I had. I don't know if there is anything else, but I'll leave it at that. You know, the other thing that came to my mind is that Green Acre is a well-established institution in Eliot, Maine. And it has been there for over a century. Abdul Baha was there. Prayers have been said. So that may also make a difference. Anyhow, thank you.
Thank you, Monosher. Before anyone answers that, I just want friends to know that Robert has to leave in a few minutes, but we're going to try and, you know, tie his shoelaces together or something. So please, whoever would like to answer that. Chief Moya, you asked about the size of the police department.
Yeah, so it's a very small police department. There's 10 of us, including some civilian staff. So as far as full-time officers, I think there's 8 of us, and I'm, you know, I would make the 9th, and then we have one admin. So very, very small. And I really like what you said about, you know, do we start with maybe smaller departments? Is that a way to, you know, to do this? I think that's a great idea. We may have said it at some point, but I don't know. It seems like a fresh idea to me right now. And part of it too, I think, is, you know, how do we do this? And I think because, as I mentioned, police culture, we have to get that buy-in, you know. And I think so for me, I think it was easier for the officers that I work with to buy in because I was, you know, very passionate about it. And they saw that, and I was, you know, wanting to have the conversations and challenging some of the thoughts that they had. I was learning as well. And so, yeah, it's hard. Somebody else mentioned community policing. You know, the more and more for my little department, the more and more we think community policing, the more and more our budgets go up. It's hard to do things that don't cost money or overtime, or, you know, there's so many of these obstacles in the way that are just tough. You know, they're just tough things that we don't often think about. You know, it makes me cringe when I hear the defund the police, because it truly is going to take more money to get to where we need to meet some reform. You know, it's going to end up costing more money. And I do believe that social workers are important. I completely support that, but unfortunately, I just think the challenge will be the cost.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Anyone
think
else?
it's a big question for us to try and figure out where this can be effective. And you know, we're sort of growing it and learning about it so intensely, and we want to kind of have it, you know, be able to move to other areas. So we're a part of it, at least from in my mind, is trying to identify what are the principles. So the principles are obviously the core ones: oneness of humanity, the nobility of every human soul, universal participation. But I think it's also these relationships and trust, as I mentioned. So I don't know, the size of the organization overall doesn't necessarily mean one thing or another. It's easier in a smaller place, right? But it also depends on the relationships, right? In a bigger place, it could also be possible if you have a smaller group within that larger unit. Now, we've approached some of the one of the larger police departments because there was some interest expressed, but it's gotten lost in the bureaucracy, right? So they can't move as quickly. So I think that was a reality, and we did even see some difference between, you know, working with Eliot and the small police force, and you know, he was, as the leader, he was all in. The two women who, the one who's the deputy and the one who's just another lead attorney, are the ones that were driving this process. But their boss, who is the elected official, had mixed feelings about it. She was supportive enough, and their passion and commitment made the difference for it to happen. But she was really conflicted, right? Because, you know, she was, you know, and she was running as it's an elected position. She's a Republican. There were all kinds of things that made it a big challenge for her. And so we could see the difference in the effect on folks as well. And with, you know, even just a small, and this is still small, right? And we were working with a group of 25 there, right? So I do think all those things are things we really have a lot of learning to do to see how is it that this could be applied.
Thank you, Robert. I'd like to go to Takesha. She had her hand up for a while, and I want to explain why I'm jumping over a few people here. Part of this work, you know, it's racial healing, racial justice. And part of that in the Baha'i community, at least as some of us interpret that, is that the Black voices need to be heard. And there's only a few Black people in the room. So trying to get in that lineup and have your question asked, you know, or to state your comment, well, the odds are against you. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to invite, and I think I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Please correct me if I'm not, but I'm going to invite her to ask her question or share her thoughts right now.
I'm trying to find myself now. But, you know, a lot of my question was answered about the size of the police force. It's almost like it was a pilot study and you had a chance to really work out the kinks in it. And now you're ready to come to Chicago, right? We need you in Chicago in the sense that I'm going there next week, but I'm dealing more with what's happening in neighborhoods between the police and the gangs, and it's been a lot of shooting. You know, 2 people who were killed last week. It's that tremendous, and I'm saying to myself, I feel like I want to do something. And I'm listening to what you're saying and say, well, your training is dealing with police officers, but I'm trying to figure out what can I do to help the neighborhoods. Have a meeting with the gang members or with the police officers. I don't know, but this is about 10 miles from the house of worship, you know? what's going on. And I'm saying that with the Baha'i principles, I'm wondering if this could possibly work. So I'm just listening to what you're saying and saying, I want to work with what's going on there. It's past urgent. It's an emergency that's happening. So as a Baha'i, I want to be a part of figuring out what I can do safely to make a difference. Now, Chief Eliot, you probably know the situation in Chicago and what's going on. It's the murder capital now of the nation. What do you do? I mean, I'm sure it's such a big bureaucracy there that it'll be very difficult to penetrate it. But I don't know. And a friend of mine says hopeless. Forget about it. You can't do anything about it. What can you do? So my question is, I wish there was a training for something to deal with the emergency problems that happen in a neighborhood as a Baha'i, what I can do, what I can start, what I can be a part of now. It's urgent, it's past urgent. A couple of people I know the kids that were killed. And I feel like sitting back saying, oh, woe is me, woe is them. It's just not the answer. So what do you do? I'm directing that question to Chief Moya.
Yeah, I don't know, but what I think is, I think you do something, because even if you have, even if you make that impact on 1, 2, 3 people that can continue that, continue this work, which is essentially what we've done, right? We've created kind of this, this kind of maze that's just broadened, because, I felt a certain way. I talked to Robert. We're having these conversations. You can see the impact it's had on the officers, and they probably wouldn't have sought this out otherwise. We brought it to them, and now they know how to kind of, feel more comfortable speaking on this. They're aware more. There's, Eliot Maine doesn't have that violence or even that gang element. So that's, like you mentioned, your safety is, obviously very, very important. But I also don't know Chicago. So where would be that area that you could, essentially break into to start the conversation? Is it the police versus the gangs, or is it, I guess I'd want to know more in that, in that respect.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to have a meeting with Father Flager. He's one of the people who are working on the south side of Chicago trying to make a difference. So it's a lot of church groups who are trying to infiltrate certain areas. And I'm hoping that that we can possibly make inroads with just dealing with, there's a bridge the gap police situation going on there too, but it's out of control now. So I don't know. I don't know what to do. I just know that it hurts to see all these kids being killed, and nothing really is being done.
I also obviously don't know, but what keeps coming to me is that you need a team.
Yes.
You need a team who regularly consults and who is unified and who plans and who acts and reflects regularly. And that it will become clear, I think, in what paths forward make sense. That is what comes to me. The other thing that comes to me is I was about to say you have to, I don't want to tell you what you have to do, but this is what are coming to me is finding those few willing people, like find the willing, whether it's just a police officer or just a gang member, and figuring out how to build that relationship. And I have no idea what that would be. But that, I feel like those are the elements that maybe are universal, is that you need a team that's unified, that's consulting, that's planning, that's acting, that's serious, that takes it serious, and that regular. And that together you can figure out something. I wish, yeah.
Jessica, you mentioned something. Sorry, Robert.
Go for it. Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, Jessica mentioned something that's important. It's like, is there a connection? Is there someone, you know, on either side that you can connect with? You know, for me, I always think it's going to be difficult for us to, you know, do this training and have, you know, bring it to other police departments. There's that religious element that I think some people are just going to shut right down to. How do we then create it while keeping it, but making it so that a police officer can go and say, hey, check this out. Check out what this, you know, what this oneness means. Just hear me out for a minute, because it's very hard to say that the oneness of humanity is, you know, to debate that's a horrible thought, you know, and that's kind of what I did, and it worked. I also, you know, you find those people that can that you feel that can kind of break in and have that impact. You know, to share a story, as we mentioned, you know, we did the Project Empathy, and I was paired up with, you know, Tanisha, who's the co-founder of BLM here in this area. And, you know, at first, after we were like, wow, this is crazy, right? Activist police officer, this is, you know, when we realized we were actually modeling what needs to be done, I was telling the story. I was telling the story at a police event with pride. You're not going to believe it. This is what we're doing, you know, and I'm explaining this. And as you all can imagine, I got one person who you could just read their demeanor and their face, and, you know, and you could say, okay, they have a thought, you know, and it's negative. And so me telling this story and saying, I remember saying, whoa, I already know what you're going to say, but hear me out. And it was a very good conversation. You know, fast forward to, you know, a couple of days ago, somebody said, that was amazing. You know, you knew what he was going to say. You read it, and you had this amazing response that everybody in the table, which was attorneys, police officers, were shaking their head in agreement. And, you know, that takes courage. I don't think everybody wants to necessarily, you know, talk about this or challenge somebody and say, wait, just hear me out. You again, to come full circle, you have to, I think, find those people that are willing to do that and be those representatives, you know, and again, on both sides, you know, how do you get, you know, the police and the activists to come together and share a podcast? How do we get somebody in that police department and somebody, you know, who's, you know, in the gang side of things?
Yeah, we've done a couple of those. I have a niece and nephew who are police officers in Chicago. Yeah. So we've gone to communities and we've done things, but as I said, now it's even more challenging now. So we're just trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out what I can do to make a difference, and how I can use some of the principles that you're talking about. And I thought about maybe empathy training would be good, and because people do shy away from the religious aspect of it. But it's gonna take a while to kind of make inroads. So I'm gonna stay the course and be patient and see what can happen. Thank you for your advice.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and I hear the depth of the challenge and the pain, and so I just want to acknowledge that how difficult it is, and, you know, all the people we're losing as a result, and these beautiful people. The only other thing I would add, and it's, you know, it's hard because I would love to have a real solution, which I of course don't in that circumstance. But I know that whatever the particular outcomes of making those connections with people, I know for me, at the core of it, there has to be the spiritual, just beseeching. That's the only way I can say it. You know, if it really wasn't going to, for me, it was like honestly going to Louis Gregory's gravesite and pouring out those prayers that provided solutions for whatever challenges that we were having there, and they were profound at times, and not as grave as you're describing, but still profound. And, you know, that's where I always have to go to. There's relying on the spiritual forces that will provide those opportunities. So.
Well, I have the house of worship. I can go there. So,
yeah.
I was going to say,
and take some people with you, you know, find those Baha'is that'll go with you. You know, like Jessica said, get a team. Get a team. Have them walk the street with you so they can see what's going on. Get some folks from North Shore.
And pray while you're walking.
Yeah, yeah, for real. For real. Yes. Mobilize.
Surreal.
Yeah, mobilize who you have access to. And I feel it in my heart, and it's just a feeling, nothing else, but I feel it in my heart. What Jessica said, that resonated with me in a deep way, that you get yourself a team. You pray for that. That team's going to come to you. You look for them and they're going to come to you, and things are going to happen because you'll be working in consort together. It won't be you alone. And that's going to be so good for you to help you carry on this important work you're trying to do. Truly, God bless you, honestly. God bless your efforts, honestly. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me. And thank all you guys for sharing and being a part of it. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Sean, you're next.
I unfortunately have to sneak out. I'm here seeing my grandchildren for the first time since COVID, and so.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
But I just want to thank all of you for coming and showing up to this conversation and learning with us. And I do promise, in my role, we will figure out ways to get this out to you in a way that hopefully will be helpful in your communities. And just thank you, Jessica, so much for your whole role in this process, and of course Chief Moya and Naji, and thank you, Sherilyn, for bringing us together. So.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's our pleasure. Let me check in with the other fellows, or persons, I should say, to see how much longer they can stay. Good Chief Moya and Jessica Sweetgrass Gaines. How long can you two stay? Naji kind of floated out of here on the sly. I don't know when he fell off or left, but he's gone already. So Chief Moya and Jessica, how much longer can you stay with us?
I've got a little while. Nobody's looking for me around here right now. So
okay,
that's
all right.
When you start seeing my little one come around, it might be time for me to go.
Okay. Jessica, how about you?
I'm hanging in there. It's my bedtime, but I'm not tired. We're talking about this.
I hear you. Yes, it gets you energized, doesn't it? Yes, absolutely. Okay, all right. So we've got Good Chief Moya and Jessica Sweetgrass Gaines. Okay, Sean, thank you for waiting.
Yes, wonderful presentation today. It's been really inspiring. And, just as a lead in, earlier this week, a member of our community here in Seattle had sent a message to the Seattle Assembly, of which I'm a part, really expressing what can we do, that she really feels terrified of the police force, right? And then
this is a person of color?
Yes.
Okay.
And the next day, the announcement for this session came out, and we were actually in our session talking about the fact that we knew that this had this situation in Eliot between the police department and Green Acre had been occurring. What can we learn about that? Who can we reach out to hear more, right? And so it was very fortuitous. And I just one real quick comment. I'm hopeful that there are other good chiefs around the country, that Chief Moya, as wonderful a human being as he is, that there are others equally as wonderful who are prepared and courageous and ready to embark on a journey like this, and I'm just hopeful, having met a few police chiefs myself and been impressed with their abilities, their stature, and their intelligence. So my question is really a two-part. One is, how ready were you to undertake this journey? How prepared were you? What did you have to do? And then now that you're on this journey, is there any advice you would have given yourself back at the start now that you've been through it a little ways? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Those are great questions. I think I was ready. I was ready in a lot of ways. I think, I'm Puerto Rican. This is a very, where I live is very, very white. I love culture. I miss culture. In Eliot, Maine, when you go on the Green Acre, especially when, it's active, you get a lot of culture there. It's like refreshing, and I always, every time I go there, I always just say it. I love it here. I don't know what it is. It's like just this peaceful, amazing place that, unfortunately, we're just starting, to really kind of be a part of that. And I've been at that department for over 15 years, and we didn't really spend any time there before that. So I was ready in a lot of ways. Personally, I was ready. Professionally, I didn't even really give it a thought. I knew where I was struggling. I knew where to go. And then this amazing thing happened, and so I just kind of went with my heart. And it really just, it paid off. I guess any advice, if I had to look back, why haven't we been doing this right all along? I think is the big question. It took me, having agita, right, from watching that video, and I think in the documentary, that entitlement that was seeping out of that officer, that was just, I don't know, it just was heavy is not even a big enough emotion, but it was so impactful that, I can second guess and wish we were doing this a long time ago. Being Hispanic, I've heard things in my own police department from officers that are not there anymore. And here's a perfect example of culture, right? I'm supposed to kind of just accept that and move on, and so, which I did. But now through this process, I'm able to I bring it up all the time again. I brought it up as part of kind of the, that buy-in that, that we had. Some of the officers are there now that experienced, that were there when I went through that experience, and they knew how I felt then. They knew I was incredibly upset and have carried that, with me. So yeah, that's the only thing I would say is that, this should have been, happening long ago. But it's happening now. And then, and I think that the issue now is truly how do we convince others to just, maybe this session, maybe it's not going to look anything the way, we were doing it. But I feel like we can create something that would be just that one, that first step, I hope that answers.
Well, speaking for the Green Acre team, we were super stoked because what Baha'i doesn't want to talk about race in America with the police force? And at the same time, who wants to talk with the police force about race in America? So we were extremely excited. And at the same time, we're never going to be ready. No amount of preparation would ever make us feel like we got this, let's go. We were like, we have no idea what's happening or what we're doing, but we're going to show up and we're going to put the work in, and we're going to work hard together to prepare as best as we can. And we prepared a lot. And but in that preparation, we didn't have any formula, we didn't have any examples, we had no clue what we were doing, except we knew what we did have were these teachings that, of course, as Baha'is, we feel like this is the medicine for the ills of today, and it's for everybody, and it's the principles. That's the only, we're not biased trainers, we're not experts in racism. We simply have access to this set of teachings. And when we really focused on the oneness of humanity, the nobility of every soul, universal participation, and our own attitudes. And yeah, I think, remember, we got together before the first session and we prayed really hard. And we did pray to Louis Gregory, and we were like, we don't know what we're doing, but we're doing it, you know, and it has to be done. Yeah, that was the first answer. What advice would I give? You know, I honestly, besides changing my own attitude, and even that I couldn't do until I had the experience. I thought, I'm like, I get this oneness of humanity thing, like, I've lived all over the world, we're one people. It's so much deeper than that. And I didn't realize that before I started this work. It is like othering people. Race is just one way that we other people. I was othering people who I thought were a problem, were racist. You know, I was othering them because they were I'm like, I don't understand the oneness of humanity if I'm othering somebody that I think is racist. I don't get it yet. And this process has taught me that. I'm sure I have a long way to go still, but it really opened my eyes. But you know, I couldn't give I can't go back and be like, Jessica, you don't understand the oneness of humanity yet. And you need to drop this attitude, because I only learned it through action. And any advice I would give us, I would say the same thing. There's really no advice I could give us because we learned it in action. And so just starting and showing up and doing it, that's the only way to learn, really. I think
I usually always say that, and I think Robert mentioned it earlier, was that I like, you know, after the killing of George Floyd, I knew that we were all going to get bombarded with training, right? That's when something bad happens, it's training. And unfortunately, it's usually online, meaningless training that, you know, you check the box, right, for insurance. And I think Robert had mentioned that. But so me going to speak to Robert I was looking for something that was authentic. I didn't want to, you know, this had to be more. And as we kind of get together and you know, like the Race Amity conference, right, this conversation, and hearing Jessica and what she's saying, it just proves, number one, that it was as authentic as it can get. I mean, you know, you put a lot of work into it, and I'm sure that it didn't necessarily go probably the way it was formatted, but it went perfectly, and everybody kind of, you know, rolled with the punches, as they say, you know, and it just it flowed, and it was authentic. And I hear, you know, Jessica talking about some of the challenges she had, and that just means so much, because that's what I wanted, right? We're all learning. We all are just kind of on the same goal, the same journey, following the same path. And that was great. I mean, that's just truly what I was seeking.
Thank you for sharing that. I would say the only other thing, looking back, is we're still trying to figure out the balance between, you know, so we came in with this document. We're going to study, because we're as Baha'is right now, we're all used to studying so many documents. You know, we put this together, this document, we're going to study it. We've got a few quotes here. We got questions for each quote. We're going to break up into small groups with the police officers, and Green Acre person is going to facilitate a small group conversation about the document. But these police officers just wanted to empty their cup and talk, you know, and I saw that from the beginning, and I could tell, like, the chief was like, can you please just like let us ask some questions and let's just talk, you know, like normal people without a document. But we felt like that was the only thing that we had to offer. But it's not actually true. We're human beings. Therefore, what we have to offer is a listening heart. Therefore, what we have to offer is accompaniment. Therefore, what we have to offer is our own lived experiences. And that's so powerful. And so you can't be rigid. you can't go into it, okay, well, this is what we're going to do now. You know, it also has to fit the needs of course, the people that you're walking with. So I would just say that one thing.
This is such good news. I'm just so loving, you know, the things you're sharing, honestly. And thank you for these phenomenal questions, folks. I think this has been, you know, one of our more engaging sessions based on your thoughts, right? Your questions, your situations. So we have Dennis McGregor and David and Rennie. And before we go to them, and I think we'll close up after we're done, we'll let David close us out. I'd like to ask if there's any person of color, African descent, BIPOC, whatever, who hasn't spoken, who would like to get in a slot here and share their thoughts or their question or whatever. And towards the end, I always do a call out for folks who haven't said anything. So if someone would like to do that, please take yourself off mute and raise a hand or speak up. It's open invite. I'm serious. I know who you are. I see you. Okay, should I call you out, Dale? Yes, you, Dale. Yes, you with the glasses. Dale's iPad.
Give me a second here. Despite being a techie, I do sometimes have problems finding the right button.
Ah, well, you've got it now.
And I found it. But I found it. Yes.
Anything you'd like to share with us or ask our guests?
Boy.
And you don't have to. You don't have to, but it's nice to see your face and hear your voice.
Oh, yeah, but thank you, Monica. Can't say that I have much of anything to say. Monica.
Okay.
Say, except thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. It has been entertaining, educational, many more other words that I just can't think of right now. Okay, nothing of the people who were here. I also saw some familiar faces from my neck of the woods.
Oh.
Yeah. Let's see now. Okay. So, currently Baltimore City, previously Baltimore County, before that Annapolis, and before that DC.
Okay.
How's that for a journey?
Yes, you know the region very well, very well. Absolutely. Yeah, quite a few people from your neck of the woods are in here tonight, and some of them still are. Well, thank you so much for being here and letting me call you out.
My pleasure, my honor. And hopefully I will be seeing more of you, and you will be seeing more of me.
Absolutely. If you're not on our subscriber list, that's wonderful. Put your email in the chat in your name so I can put you on our subscriber list. Anyone else too, if you're not already on there. So we'd love to have you come to everything. And anyone else here who's not on our subscriber list as well. Just put your email in there and your city and state, and I'll add you to our wonderful mailing list. I want to call out one other person.
Will do.
Here. Thank you, Dale. Thank you so much. I think they have left. All right. So I thought it was one of our Indigenous family members from Canada who was here, Bob and Louise, and I've never met Louise's husband, and it looked like Louise, who did a beautiful story at the potlatch that we did, the praise, prayer, and devotional potlatch that we did last year. And we're coming back and doing another one next year, folks. So you're the first to hear about that. You'll be hearing more information on that. Yes, we're very excited. Okay, so let's get back to our last two persons with questions. Dennis, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. My God, thank you for this.
Where's Mary?
Oh, she's in another study session with Hukukala,
Okay.
about Hukukala with
Okay,
African American.
okay.
So anyway, and this is our anniversary. So by the way,
Oh, happy anniversary.
number 28. She's a very brave woman, so I got to give her credit.
How many years?
28.
28. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, some of the things already that I already questions about were already touched on, because I was kind of wondering about what was going on. If the radiance that was happening in this area and these efforts was going out to other areas. Sounds like it has been, and it's touching another interest in other areas, even though some had pulled back as well. We want to do it, and whatnot, but it's the seeds are still going out there. That's critical. I just want to thank Takesha to say what she don't know what to say to comfort her, but it's hard. It's painful just to hear it secondhand. But if you're there in the middle of it, there's no comparison to feeling that. But anyway, the courage it took to do this. I think the individual processes that it's going to take to do this, whether Eliot going, had to be some level of humility to go to the Green Acre and say, you know what, after seeing what happened with the George Floyd thing, what can we do? Let's move forward. What can we do to move forward? And praise God for that. And prayers for keep going, prayers for keeping it happening. And the courage of like Jessica and the others had to go through their own journey, transformation. We all have to do that. And it's so true. And I think it's genuine. It's the process of, because I know Baha'i was mentioned, who'd visited Green Acre, and it's thrown around like a catchphrase often. But is it show loving kindness to everyone who crosses your path, even those who you feel like who are the oppressors. But that's not fair to say that's sterilizing, but often it can be. Too many times it can be that way. But in this process, Green Acre is being a model how not to be an oppressor. So praise God for that. But I think it's the humility and the learning and the modeling that would love to be able to share this with other people in my area. I live in just outside of Fort Worth, Texas. Of course, we have our own challenges. Y'all have heard what's going on in this high school in Arlington, so it's nationwide. But anyway, it just also the relationship that developed was so exciting to know that I think Robert's not here to speak about it, but taking the initiative to introduce yourself and just keep going at it. So that's critical. And I do have a question that I know Najee said it took, I don't know how it took 10 hours to prepare for it, the sessions. And it sounded like maybe 9 hours of it was prayers. I don't know. That's good. But I'm just kind of curious, what was some of the preparations for that, other than including the prayers? I know that was super critical as well.
A lot of stumbling around in the dark. Like, okay, what do we do? Like literally starting with a blank slate, like not knowing. I would say we took 10 hours for the first session. And because we had no idea how it would go. We had no idea how to plan for the second one until the first one happened. And I would say each time it was a lot of planning. Yeah, how did we do it? I think we identified what do we have to offer? What do we want to cover? What are the principles at play? So for example, I immediately wanted to start talking about, okay, let's understand what structural racism is. Because we realize that that is a major sticking point for a lot of people, is folks think I'm not racist. I don't say bad things about Black and brown people, therefore I'm not racist. Well, it's a lot more than that, you know, and people don't understand that yet. A lot of folks don't understand. So I immediately wanted to start with that. And so there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of, well, I think we should cover this. And another person was like, well, maybe that's not the best thing to start with. So a lot of very genuine consultation. You know, Abdul Baha says, from the clash of differing opinions comes the spark of truth. But it wasn't like we were never fighting, but we had different opinions, but we stayed unified in exploring those different opinions. And there was a few times where I'm like, we're not going deep enough, we're not going hard enough, we're not going fast enough, you know. But I had to take a step back and say, that is not what the group feels. That's what I feel. And I've already stated it very clearly. I've been very clear about that. And so then I had to go along with the group and be in unity about that. And thank God I did, because it was not a wise move. And I saw that very clearly. You know, we're told in local spiritual assemblies that if you make a decision, a unified decision, and it's the wrong decision, it will be made right. If you make a unified decision and it's the right decision, it'll be made very clear that it was the right decision. And we maintained that, you know, and I think that really, really served us. So yeah, a lot of stumbling around in the dark and literally just starting from scratch. And okay, what do we want to cover? Okay, what are the principles? All right, now what quotes can we find, or what guidance from the House of Justice do we want to bring in and use? Now, what questions do we want to ask the group after they've studied this quote? And that was really the foundation of it. I wish I remembered more. I wish I could actually give you, I wish I could give you more details, but that's really that was really the crux of it. And before, I just want to say that in so many ways, this was all made possible by Robert's ability to connect with people. And it was made possible by Eliot's desire to go down this road. They were really the two who were pushing this forward. And it was really, I think it was like Robert laid the foundation in a way and Eliot pushed it forward. That's how it felt on the Green Acre side. And I don't know if Eliot knows this, but we were often like, thank God, like this wouldn't be possible if it weren't for Eliot's the one who's making this happen. And that's what I would say. You know, somebody at one point said, I hope and pray that there are other police chiefs in the country like Eliot. Pray that you find them, because they will enable it to happen. Pray, I'm not kidding, like pray, beseech, like Robert said, that you find them. Because I know they're out there. They might be diamonds in the rough, but they're out there. And they will be the key that unlocks this whole process. Not to say you can't do it without them, but that's the most efficacious way. You know?
Thank you for asking that, Janice, because that was a question I had too, and I'm sure many of us did, you know, was how did you prepare? Chief, I'm sorry, I just can't call you Eliot. I'm stuck on Chief, but, and I'm trying to pare back on the good Chief, you know, so I know that makes it hard. You got to live up to it every time someone says that. Not going to give you any slack at all. But is there anything that you'd like to share about that? Was there any preparation on your part initially, so to speak, or was it kind of like, okay, they're going to come over, they want to talk to us, and let's kind of see what they have, you know, to offer? Or how did that initially take shape for you and your guys and women?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was kind of my, you know, my feeling of desperation almost, that we needed to do something, you know, and then really, you know, like Jessica said, I kind of just put it on Robert's lap and
Mhm.
you know, they went forward from there. After that first session, it's kind of where I felt like it's here we are. Now we have to keep this moving forward beyond the session. So even in between, you know, sometimes we had a plan to get together again and then we had to push it out, you know, so how do we
Right.
keep this active and how do we keep the conversation going
Mhm.
in within the walls of the police department? And I have to say, it didn't take much. It was happening. You know, it was kind of, you know, amazing that all of a sudden this conversation was happening. No one was avoiding the conversation. In fact, people didn't even really, I think, feel they needed to have, you know, talks about race. But now we were, and we still today. And everybody's just, you know, scratching their heads with, you know, bewildered because they're like, why did we miss this? Why did we not know? And so just, you know, the victory, if anything, is that these conversations are now comfortable. People will think of something and say, wait a minute, I'm not sure about this. You know, I've got officers that will often say, you know, I gotta find Najee. I gotta talk to Najee, you know, or the same, you know, and it's and that's amazing. You know, that's you know, proving this, I think, this willingness to learn. You know, the Green Acre staff did an amazing job to kind of, you know, give us information, allow us to vent at times, you know, and all these little pearls of wisdom that they didn't know. And it's just a different place now. It's just a different place now as far as that, a better place.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, David and Rennie, who's speaking, Rennie or David?
Well, I always seem to hog the conversation from Rennie. She's got so much to say. But I just want to especially say, Jessica, please pass along to Robert and Najib that you have made Sarah Farmer so happy. She is, and I hope Chief Eliot, you know a little bit about her and her enormous efforts on a very grandiose scale. I mean, she worked for world peace, but she also tended to the community in which she lived, and really, her parents were in the Underground Railroad, and but I just have a little. I do have a question for Chief Eliot.
Okay, go to the question.
First, there's just a very short little anecdote. I took an airplane to Haifa, and there was Mrs. Munsef, who was a Persian lady living in India, who was a dynamic speaker, and she would go to jails and prisons. And she told me this one typical incident where she went in and the guard said, oh, we had to round up these guys, ma'am, but they'll probably start leaving pretty soon, but don't be offended. You know, there's so many religious speakers come in here. And she began talking about the oneness of mankind and the oneness of all religions and the need for, you know, for the oneness of men and women. She started talking about all these important universal principles. And the guys were listening, and the guard sat down, and this big guy in front said, ma'am, when are you going to start telling us about morals? And she said, well, you know, that's your affair. You are men of action. That's why you're here. Your actions went to the wrong place. I'm trying to give you something that you can use your energy and your desire for action to create a difference in the world. But
beautiful story.
She was something. She was really great. But you know, I have a brother-in-law who has been a cop most of his life. He was in the Marines, and we're in constant, you know, delicate dance conversation. He's from the South, and the one thing that is very apparent to me is that every police officer needs a lot of counseling because they're sent into the worst. They see the very worst of humanity. That's their job. They've got to go in where trouble is. And too often they're not sent to where people are getting robbed by a fountain pen. that usually is, the guys at the desks get to go and mop that up. But how do you kind of moderate this attitude that they have, not just about people of color, but about the lower dregs? The My Fair Lady was all about how just the way a person talks will generate the way people react to them. How can we somehow give them a chance to be something more than just the guy with a gun?
Yeah, that's what we're working on now. and you said it. It's police officers see a lot, even in small town Eliot, Maine. I've seen some stuff that I things are popping into my head right now that are pretty powerful and probably most people don't see. And right now, this thought about officer wellness, like you said, counseling. I mean, I think that's so true. We're still in the middle of trying to break that stigma. I'm trying to do my best to lead by example. We've finally sent our officers to crisis intervention training. We've started peer support teams so that we can talk about these incidences after, right after they happen. Make sure there's some follow up with counselors and things like that. It's another part of that entire kind of culture shift that I'm talking about, even with the conversations about race. And my thought, which organically shifted from having these conversations to all of a sudden, making this move towards mental health, both on the policing side, and I mean that by us as police officers and doing our jobs, but then also internally. And it's still a work in progress, but if we're really taking a deep look inside, that's when we're going to be better. And that's when I think everything else will kind of fall into place as a result, or that's my hope anyway. That's like that's the big hope. If we can really truly take a look in the mirror and say, I can be better. You said something great. The My Fair Lady, it really is important how you talk to people. In fact, I think there's a case in the Supreme Court right now that talks about, what kind of impact did the officer's words or his actions before something happened, really kind of change how that call went. And I think that's important. And right now, when we're seeing these trainings, we're seeing de-escalation, we're seeing a lot more of these, types of trainings that are powerful. It seems simple to me. It seems like, can't treat somebody decently, right? Have a good conversation with somebody, and you're gonna have I would think most of the time have a pretty good interaction. But we are only human. And so sometimes our emotions and the things that we see get the best of us. And so I think what you said is 100% right. And we are kind of making sure that we're checking in on one another, and even me, myself, which is something that, police work that didn't really often do or encourage.
Do you have a hotline with Chris Swanson?
I do not, but it sounds like I probably should.
In Flint, he's his story is pretty amazing.
Well, I'm afraid we don't have time for his story though, David. But yeah, I'm sorry.
He's the sheriff that went with the protesters.
Okay, that's a good story.
You're right.
That's a good story. Thank you. We'll all have to Google it for those of us that don't know it. Now I was remiss in one thing, and I looked over someone's question in the chat, and one of the friends brought it to my attention, Catherine Werzer. So I couldn't find it again, but she's gonna come on and ask this very last question. And then I'd like to invite someone to say a prayer or a gratitude and a good night. So Catherine?
I believe it was Manu Share. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly,
okay.
but he asked multiple questions. And one of his questions was about the greater community in Eliot, and what type of reaction there has been to this effort in Eliot. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
You know, I think with some of us, at least in one of the sessions, we've kind of expanded a little bit and had one of our members of the select board. I think we also had our director of community services, that went. So my goal in this was really to start off and work internally. I think right now we're starting to see where, with the Project Empathy and the podcast, I think now we're starting to kind of cast that wider net to start bringing the community into it a little bit more. That was always the goal, but I just felt, it felt like we needed to get there internally first, if that makes sense. I don't know, Jessica, you might have a perspective on it.
Sure. Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
We're working kind of in these expanding circles. We had quite a few conversations about, okay, how do we involve more people into this with the police? We had conversations with the police and then the Green Acre team by itself. And, one of our concerns was, so this works because the police and the Green Acre team we have a unity of understanding about what it is that we're doing. We're having conversations about principles. We're not attacking each other. We're not calling each other out, but we are being honest about things. We're asking questions. So it never, ever went into the realm of disrespectful or heated or attacking. And our concern was, we need to make sure that foundation is laid with each group that we bring in. And so we need to do it slowly. And it's really interesting because, just that one time where we invited a few other people in, amazing relationships were established through that. And in fact, now Green Acre is really involved with the community service department and offering programming at the elementary school and maybe now at the high school. We're actually doing like youth empowerment work through that one meeting of her coming here. So again, just the power of relationships. But yeah, we're going slowly because we know that foundation, that unity of understanding of what it is that we're doing here, and that we're all on the same team has to be laid first before you bring in other people.
Unity of thought and action. Yeah. Wow, I don't want to go.
We should have Jessica sing us out.
Oh.
If it's been a long night for her, I don't want to, if she's willing, awesome. If not, it's awesome.
I'm almost always willing because it feeds my soul.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Let me just look. It's been a long
How
time.
about, how about, oh gosh. There's a couple you do that I just love so much that have that Appalachia deep soul to them. Yeah.
If you think of it, let me know. I'm looking at my list.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what it's called. Oh Lord, I'm your child.
Woo!
That's it, right?
That one takes some. All right.
Well, you pick another one then. That's
No,
okay.
No, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna rise to the challenge.
All right. She's sitting up in her chair.
Right. But this one comes to us from South Carolina. There's a couple folks, I think, who were, learned this in the church and then brought it into the Baha'i community and changed the words up a little bit. So I'll do a bit of a shortened version of it.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Pleasure. Oh Lord, I'm your child. Oh
set free. Oh Lord, I'm your child. Oh Lord, I'm your child. I'm down here working in your vineyard. Can't do nothing till you come. I believe, yes, I believe. Oh, that Muhammad, he died for me. Yes, he did. And with the coming of Baha'u'llah, all mankind will be set free.
Thanks.
That is such nourishment for the soul. Oh, thank you so much. We have to have you all back again. Truly, this has just been such a great experience and conversation. And I just feel so blessed to know about the work that you have undertaken and are doing. It's just incredible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So with that, friends, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Oh, let me tell you what's coming in 2 weeks. The advent of divine justice as a process to unlearn racism, to undo racism. It's a very systematic approach by Vanita McGee and Janae Brody. It's quite an experience. You'll find it absolutely fascinating and something you can start doing right away to enhance your own undertaking in addressing this most vital and challenging issue for all of us. So everyone's always invited. Yes, a
Yeah, I
question
just
there.
wanted to say I'm in that group right now. And
yes.
it's awesome. So I'm so happy you're doing that.
Yes, we're really looking forward to it. And they have groups and they go through the work. They've created a workbook and everything. So they're going to come in and share what they've developed. And I was very excited when I first saw part of their presentation. I didn't catch the whole thing. I saw part of it. And it just made me realize, among other things too, but there's just so much brilliance in the Baha'i community, and particularly among people of African descent and other minority groups. And to me, they just epitomized this. And so I really encourage you. It's for all people, not just whites or blacks, whatever, Persians, whatever. It's really for all people. So I encourage you to really invite your friends and to come and to see what you can get out of it. And thank you so much for your wonderful questions this evening. It made it such a great discussion. Thank you. And we love you. We truly do. And everyone I didn't get a chance to say hi to, I see you, I saw you, I love you. And have a great night and a wonderful 2 weeks. Good night, friends.
Awesome.
Aloha.
Marilyn, you're amazing. Oh my God.
So are you.
Thank you so
Good
much.
Chief. Thank you so much, good Chief Moya. I love you too. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank
Good night,
you.
Chief.
Thank you.